Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Natasha and I am from Calgary, Alberta. I have a fairly small family. I have one younger sister. My parents are immigrants from Fiji, and I am the first generation born and raised in Canada. My upbringing, it was fairly challenging. Being the firstborn child of immigrant parents meant that I had a lot of responsibility at a very young age, so I had to take care of my sister while my parents worked. We grew up in a really religious household. Like my father's family is Christian. They practice the Mormon faith. And my mother's family, most of them are Christian as well. My grandfather and my great uncle were Muslim, but they still live in Fiji, so I didn't really have a lot of contact with them. So, you know, going to church every Sunday was very common. We did a lot of religious activities. We had to go to activities at the church as well. Yeah, we celebrate Christmas, we celebrated Easter, all kinds of holidays. Identifying myself as a Christian, as a child, you're taught, you know, to believe in God and this is your religion. So my parents were very adamant in teaching us this and going to church and such. So we were involved, and as a child, you don't really question what you know. You kind of just believe whatever it is your parents tell you. So I happily identified myself as a Christian, and in the Mormon faith, when you're 8 years old is when you get baptized into the church, because when you're 8, you have more of an ability to make a decision to say, yes, I want to be Mormon. So, you know, I was happy to do it. Like, I love God and I love Jesus, and so I'm ready to get baptized. And you know, I was happily Christian, and in the community I grew up in, it was the main faith, right? I didn't grow up around any Muslims or anything like that. So it was my only real exposure to any type of religion that was Christianity. And then when I was a teenager, so probably around the age of 17 or so, is when I really started to question my beliefs. And why do I believe that the Mormon faith is the right faith, or Christianity is the right faith, or do I believe in God? Why do I believe in God? Do I believe that Jesus was actually crucified? Like, all these questions started coming up. So I think at that point I decided that, you know, once I started researching and reading on my own and asking questions and not being able to get answers that were satisfactory or logical or made any kind of sense to me, is when I decided that, you know, Christianity may not be the right path for me. When we're youth in the church, we were required to attend seminary. And so that is from grade 9 to grade 12, you're required to attend an hour and a half before school of like pure Bible study. So I didn't really have a relationship with the Bible, but I did, alhamdulillah, get a chance to actually research and read it and try and understand what was going on. So you'd have a teacher, we'd have classrooms, and we'd have various books like the Old Testament, the New Testament, and then religious texts that Mormons have, and we would study them, kind of learn what they mean. So alhamdulillah, I did get the chance to really get guidance in that and studying the Bible. What I remember when I was about 6 or 7, my mom's uncle, when I've been to Fiji once and I was very young, but they would come and visit our family, and every time he went to go do salat, I would always go with him, and I was always drawn to, like, I want to just go, I want to see what he does when he prays. But it wasn't something that it was like, okay, when I get older I'm going to be Muslim. It was just something that I think I was drawn to. And I didn't really know anything about Islam. Like, my mom would celebrate Eid, but it was more of like a social activity. You have family over and you eat, but there was no real religious information. So unfortunately, what I got about Islam was from media, like everybody else, right? And it didn't really impact me in that it was a negative thing. I just assumed that all Arabs were Muslim, you know, and I was wrong, of course, but that was what I thought. And I saw women wear hijab, and I was just like, oh, you know, they were hijab. Never really at that time thought anything of it. I was just like, oh, might kind of suck to not do your hair, but like, I didn't really get it. So there wasn't a real like set, this is who Muslims are and this is what they believe. I didn't really have that knowledge. What piqued my interest in Islam? Islam was brought into my life at a time where I wasn't practicing any religion at all. I was actually very opposed to religion because I truly believed that it was everything that was wrong with what's going on in the world. And I just couldn't understand why we needed religion. Like, why can't we just have a spiritual relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Like, why can't we just focus on that? So I would always call myself, I'm a spiritual person. You know, I'm not religious. I don't believe in religion. I just, you know, I have my own personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's good enough for me. So after I left the Mormon church, I went through a very hard time in my life, a very dark period where, you name it, I did it, and it was a very dark place for my soul. And when I was in my mid-20s is when Islam was brought into my life. And at that time I was like, you know, I don't like religion, but you know, why not? Let's just see what this is about. And I remember one day this individual asked if they could pray and like use my room to pray. And I was like, yeah, sure, but can I watch you pray? I was just curious about like, what is this? And I remember watching this person prostrate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to this day, that image is seared in my brain. I can see it like it was yesterday. And this was like in 2008. And it was such a powerful image for me because there was this person taking out a portion of their day to prostrate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and like in complete submission and just saying, I'm a mere servant and I'm praying to God, you know, for various reasons. And I think that's what really piqued my curiosity. And I was like, okay, you know, I know Christianity and I've never experienced or seen anything like this. And when I saw that, I'm like, this religion must be something really beautiful to make a person completely just submit to God in that way and take the time out of their busy day to pray. And so after that point, I was really interested. So I, you know, alhamdulillah, was able to get more information and do more research and kind of educate myself about what Islam was. And alhamdulillah, it was amazing because the more I read, the more I was like, oh, this is the same thing in Christianity. And I could, you know, Islam is the complete religion. And so it brought me a lot of peace to see that it actually is the complete religion because it's not anything new. It's a continuation from Christianity. So there was a lot of similarities for me, and it made it easier for me to kind of digest the information because it wasn't a foreign concept. I came across the Quran the year that I was first studying Islam. And it was something that I was just doing, but subhanAllah, my sister is actually the one who had a copy of it in the house. I never knew it was there. And when I told her I was, you know, looking into it, she's like, yeah, I've been kind of, you know, reading. And she's like, I have a Quran if you want to see. And I was like, sure, like, I'm interested, right? So I took it, and I just, at that time, I didn't look through it as like to gain knowledge. It was more of just curiosity. I'm going to read this like a book and see what the similarities are and like what is this religion. So I was just able to kind of go through it and just read it, and that was my first exposure to Quran. SubhanAllah, like hijab was a very difficult concept for me, very difficult because modesty is not a foreign concept to me. Growing up, like, you know, I had to make sure that I was dressed modestly, but modesty in Christianity and modesty in Islam are different. And to me, although I understand, you know, like now I understand hijab is not just covering my head, it's my behavior as well, it's observing hijab. I didn't understand. All I saw back then was like women covering their head and wearing certain kinds of clothing, and I was like, this is oppressive to women, like they can't express themselves, and like they're being treated like less than, and like why don't men have to wear hijab, and why don't they have to like wear a certain kind of clothing? Why is the onus only on the woman? So it was difficult. I just couldn't understand, you know, why is it so important to cover my hair? So I did a lot of research. I before I decided to put on hijab, I studied it for about a year. So I sought out sisters who wore hijab, and I did like mini interviews. I'm like, why do you wear it? How do you feel? What are your challenges? Like, what is this about? I asked people, you know, what is it that made you actually put on hijab? Like, what made you wake up that day and say, that's it, I'm wearing hijab from now on? And I got various answers, and some of them were, it's hair is part of women's beauty. And for me, I'm like, yes, absolutely. But it's still not a good enough answer for me. And I think the best answer I got was from a sister who said, it is your submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, you're being told that you should wear hijab, and that's why you wear hijab. And I don't know why, for me, I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. And also, for me, wearing hijab identifies myself to other people as a Muslim woman. So I find that before I wear hijab and after I wear hijab, people are more respectful around me in the way they talk and the way they carry themselves and what they do and what they say and the language that they use, which I really do appreciate. But for me, I don't think it was a journey for sure. I didn't think that I would ever be a sister who wore hijab, like, in a million years. Like, I was like, well, maybe after I'm married and have kids, because I would want my daughter to wear hijab, but, how can I say my daughter to wear hijab, but when I don't observe it myself? And so I started practicing wearing hijab in my house, and I was like, okay, you kind of get to see yourself in hijab, and you're like, okay, this is different, and then you practice and practice. I watched a bunch of videos and I talked to a bunch of friends, and I remember it was March of last year. I went to an orientation for school, and I remember sitting in the classroom, and there was men and women mixed, and I remember sitting there and I was dressed modestly. There was nothing, and I remember sitting there and I could feel a certain individual staring, and it made me feel so uncomfortable. And in my head, I was like, man, I cannot wait to wear hijab. And that's when I knew I was ready to wear it. But I didn't put it on. I had to, break it to my mother and say, this is what I want to do. I want to wear hijab, which is a very difficult concept for her to this day. And tell my friends and, make adjustments to my wardrobe. And I decided this was my first Muharram, even though I've been a revert for about 5 years. October last year was my first Muharram, and I would go to the mosque and they would have Arabic lectures, and I'd come home and I'd watch on YouTube, I'd watch English lectures, and I was watching one by Shaykh Usama, and the topic was not related to hijab. And I remember sitting there and I was thinking, okay, when am I going to put it on? When am I going to put it on? And subhanAllah, in that lecture, he mentioned hijab twice. And I was like, okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and I'm going to put it on. And that was it. Alhamdulillah, I put it on. And now I understand, on the other side, hijab, women who wear hijab, it takes an incredible amount of strength in a Western society to stand up for what you believe in and, fight for your right as women to not be oppressed. Hijab is quite the opposite of oppression for me. It's liberation for women. So it's amazing how it changed from, I feel like these women are so oppressed and they can't express themselves, to now, like, I can't imagine leaving my house without hijab, because it's more liberating for me to be taken as a human being than as, just another woman who might look good that day. It's so crazy after I put on hijab, because instantly I felt more like a woman. It's like, subhanAllah, like, I put on hijab and I left my house and I was like, oh, I feel so much like more beautiful, and I feel so protected and safe. And like, for me, hijab is very difficult because I lost friends because of hijab, and my relationship with my mother changed because of hijab. But like,